Episode 86, STEM Squared with H. Puentes.
We're able to move a diverse candidate from one of 7,000 that's probably going to get eaten up by the HR algorithm to now one of a few hundred, if that. And now you start to really think about how you can really make an impact.
Welcome, fellow STEM enthusiasts, to the STEM Southwest podcast, your source for all things science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This podcast is designed to create STEM connections, cohesion, and elevation. This is a place where STEM enthusiasts gather to learn about some amazing STEM rock stars and activities of the Southwest and beyond that are impacting the world. If you have longed to be united with your fellow STEM nerds, then you've found your people here at STEM Southwest. And now, here are your hosts, Bob and Shelley.
Hey everyone, this is Bob.
And I'm Shelley.
And together we are
STEM Southwest. Well, Bob, I have to first start off with a big apology. You remind me of that frequently.
Yes, I do.
Yes, you do. But I'm out here apologizing to our viewers and our listeners because the summer has gotten away from me. And I realize I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. Some of you have reached out and asked what's going on. Honestly, it's just been a series of summer. It's a summer series of craziness between moving some of our kids, multiple kids, different parts of the country, moving friends.
You have to admit, it's always crazy. It doesn't matter if it's summer or not. Except now we have a slight change in our life. We are, for the first time, empty nesters. So hopefully that leads to a whole different approach in how we do things.
Let's just say we were empty nesters for, 2 weeks? Okay, the other ones are just back for a visit, but
right.
The cool part is, look, our new setup here. We're in a new space, and it hopefully will make things easier. We've got a bunch of guests lined up, and I'm really excited about it. But before we share that, let's just kind of highlight what we've been up to, what's been going on, and we'd love to hear from you. What's been going on with you? And do you know anyone that you'd like us to interview? Because we really love your input and your ideas, and that's really important to us. So, any highlights from the summer?
I just said it.
Summer of 22.
We're empty nesters.
We're empty nesters. That was a big highlight.
Yeah.
A couple trips to celebrate. Couple trips coming up, right? And for me, I'm super excited. Be greater than average. We just hosted our first cohort of Girls into Tech. And this really takes the philosophy that I have about supporting young women and how young women come into STEM in a different way than young men do, and really providing ongoing support. So what makes this so special is just really the amount of time that we're focusing on building relationships, building positive interactions and opportunities, and just amazing experiences for these young women.
Let me bring it down to my level. First of all, what is a cohort?
A group of girls, the first initial class, and theoretically this group will be sticking together through a lot of our other programs, and we'll have cohorts launching from all over. Of course, we're starting here in New Mexico, but our hope is to very quickly grow nationwide. And so it's a hit. It's a smash hit. 100% of the girls and their feedback and the parent feedback was just overwhelming. And you could just feel it as the week went on. Although I'm exhausted.
Can you give a snapshot of some of the activities that you were engaged in?
So we don't have time in just 1 week. It's a 1 week kickoff to a year-long program that's going to bring new experiences into their lives. And this particular group of girls, they live in a rural area of our state. And so they don't have great access to science, technology, engineering, and math experiences. And so it was a very fast paced series of everything from rocketry and building, learning how to use tools, to speakers that we brought in. And one of our prior guests, George Garospi, who's with NASA, he actually made the trip to be in person with the girls, which was mind-blowing for so many of them. We had other guests that the young women were like, I didn't understand that coding would be so amazing. I think maybe I want to learn how to code. And that coming from a group of girls where none of them really wanted to know how to code. So just an introduction and snapshot of all the different possibilities that a STEM career could open for their future life launch.
So I wanted to jump on what you'd said. You'd said rural areas, and yes, this is a rural area, but it is a changing area that Meta has located there, formerly Facebook, and Meta is the sponsor of this first cohort.
They are. They have been such great partners, and it's exciting. The girls don't even know this yet, but when the timing is right, the girls will get to do a behind-the-scenes tour of the data center, and that will be a really special opportunity. And we've just got a lot of special opportunities lined up. We are targeting girls in middle school and maybe just a tad bit younger, because we know the research shows us that that's when we start losing our young women. And I learned so much about all of that this past week. You know, our young ladies, they go into STEM careers because they want to help people, which is why often we see a lot more young women in the biosciences, helping to change their vocabulary, helping them to understand that you can be an electrical engineer and still help people. You can be a computer scientist and help people. That you can be work for NASA and help people, right? That there's lots of ways that you can help people and use science, technology, engineering, and math. So that's really special. And we're going to track these girls. They're going to continue to participate. And that's one of the beauties of this program. So we are out there looking for sponsors of more cohorts. This is an underserved area that we reached. We're creating diversity and inclusion where our young women can have a seat at the STEM table. And it may take a little time. This is an investment in the future. And that's what makes me so excited to work with an organization like Meta that understands that this investment this past week and going forward into this next year, it's going to take us a while to see that come, but it's going to happen.
So we are very excited about Girls in Tech, what's going on there, but we are also very focused on our boys, our male students. Mm-hmm. And why I'm saying this is that 2 days ago, we got a letter from one of our students who just graduated. And he actually comes from a family where 6 siblings together have participated on our robotics team at various points in time. And the letter, for someone who's not as emotional as you, almost brought a tear to my eye. It was very heartfelt what he had said. He recognized the experience he'd gotten here and our commitment to him and the other students. And so that actually is one of the motivators that keeps us working in this area with young people, knowing that there's so much opportunity out there, and sometimes you need a guide to help get you there. And so that hopefully we are being that guide.
Yeah. And parents need partners, you know, educators need partners to help with these young people. So that's exciting. And, you know, that really there's a lot I want to talk about, but that really does integrate directly with our guest that we're having today. And the interview that we did. I will say that kids definitely the future, our focus for the future. We're getting ready to enter our 18th robotics season, you and I, something like that. Anyway, if you're in New Mexico or the Rio Rancho, Albuquerque area and your child wants to participate, reach out to us because enrollment is just about to start with that. And then, of course, we have our end of the summer cubing competition coming up, which is going to be super exciting.
What is that?
Yeah, Be Cubed is a competition that we've run for 3 years. And it's the only state WCA, World Cubing Association competition that's offered in the state. And so we have somewhere near 90 participants of all ages from 3 different countries, from multiple states, coming to Rio Rancho, New Mexico to compete in this. And we'll have I hear that we have some cubing royalty that will be there, a gentleman from Oregon. Maybe we can get him to be a guest just because
Actually,
he's
that's a really good idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
it'd be kind of fun. Our mayor's going to come out and just get the crowd excited. And it's going to be a great event coming up in August, the beginning of August. There's so much going on. We had the PNM Power Kick. We got to go to a United soccer game and cheer on a young woman that was selected to shoot goals for us. And with every goal, our nonprofit received a donation from PNM, our local power company. And that was really fun, wasn't it? It was a special experience.
Yes, it was. And you actually reminded me of another event that we were with. We were at a PNM event with Avangrid, which is still moving forward in the state, where they're basically going to become partners and basically ultimately purchase PNM.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So much has been happening. Those are just like a few of the highlights. We're getting ready to roll into robotics season. But right before we jump into robotics season, you and I are going to head to FinCon, the Financial Convention. Is that what it's short for?
Could you say that faster? It's actually just noticed FinCon. It's 2022, FinCon 2022, and we expect to have our second annual FinTech competition there and bring on hopefully at least 1 or 2 of the
absolutely winners.
Yes, and also bring on our guest from last year who's actually sponsoring. I think there's 2 organizations sponsoring it this year, so
great.
It's growing in interest.
So we've had guests about that. We'll have to put the notes and connections for those in the show notes to those different interviews that we've done.
Right. It was Ryan Ruff last year who was there, emceed it, and so looking forward to speaking with him again.
And if by chance you're at FinCon, make sure you reach out. We would love to connect. We're very excited, and even our podcast editor is going to be there with us.
Yes. I was thinking about all the other things. FinCon is an amazing place to be, but it's in a very exciting place where there's a lazy river. So I may be found out on that several times during the conference.
What? Okay. All right. Enjoy yourself.
That's what it's about.
Whatever. Okay. So let's just talk about our guest for this episode. And we've kind of rattled on to try and get you all up to date with what's been happening. And we've been really excited about this next interview for some time. And we did have some technical difficulties. We are using a new platform for our podcast, but we've been told by our editor, we haven't seen it yet ourselves, but we've been told that the quality is so much better. And so that hopefully is a benefit to you.
And H. Puentes is our guest today with San Diego Squared, or SD2, and I label him very early on in the interview being the most patient man based on our technical difficulties, but he is he's very passionate about what he's doing. He's got an interesting story, and he's connecting people with the STEM world, with employers that otherwise wouldn't get a chance except for the efforts of him and his organization.
Yes. And I think what's really special about his organization was that the idea for it really was from someone who was already a leader in tech. And that gentleman reached out and said, I want to do something. And I want to support it. So let's start a nonprofit. And that's kind of how that came to be, San Diego Squared. That's something for all community members and business leaders to really think about that these nonprofits right now, these are pretty tough times for nonprofits. I mean, you and I can attest to that.
Yes.
And as president of the board of our nonprofit, you are out there making fundraising calls. As executive director of the nonprofit, I am working on fundraisers and partnerships and whatever we can to make sure that there are resources to serve a diverse, H. Puentes, one of the things that he's very committed to is diversity in STEM. And I would say he approaches it a little bit differently than we do at our nonprofit, R4 Creating. But that really is the reality, is that we're trying to serve the underserved, to create a place at the table, to create amazing, unique experiences that are going to engage and capture and create future innovation.
So I think about a couple of things with respect to this interview. Number one, you had mentioned the gentleman who approached H. Puentes about starting this organization. The individual who is very renowned in his field is not looking for accolades, getting press and all that. He's kind of behind the scenes, and that's where he prefers to be, but he knows he's having a lot of positive impact on young people in the STEM community and the underserved community. And H. Puentes is not hesitant to talk about his wife, and it's a balance, and I think we're a good balance for each other as well. But having a partner alongside you versus trying to do this on your own can have a lot of positive impact.
Absolutely. So, anything else?
No, I'm excited to get into this interview.
High five. We're back in the running. Episode 86, STEM Squared.
So, Shelley, have the world's most patient man with us today. That's going to be his new moniker. I'm going to put it that way.
It's all good.
Why I say that is that we are in a new podcast platform, and we've had some difficulties along the way. This is actually our second take, and he yet sits there relaxed. And I get a sense that is who H. Puentes, who is our guest, that's how he is as an individual, and how he has had so much of an impact in such a short time. We're going to learn about his organization, San Diego Squared, or SD2, and what it is engaged in, its origin story. And there's so much to hear about that. But before we do that, we want to hear about H. Puentes himself, who is a founding member, a board member, and the executive director for SD2. So he wears a lot of hats. But what got you to this point in time? Where did it all start?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you for what you do. It's interesting you talk about me being patient. I'm going to ride with this because I think when you think about the work that we're doing, because you ask, well, why is he just sitting there so patiently smiling and okay? It's actually, I really think it's sort of a reflection of the work we're trying to do at San Diego Squared, right? Which is really inject the humanity in this work with respect to diversity and inclusion. And how can I expect to be able to work with students that have been underrepresented and sitting at the periphery for far too long, missing that real human connection to an industry that doesn't look like them, if I can't sit an extra 15 minutes or 30 minutes when I've got two incredible people that want to lift our voice and lift our journey, right? And so I do the patience, or I do it because I really think it's, if you don't do it every day and you don't practice it, then the students aren't going to feel that. And if the students don't feel that humanity, then we're not going to be able to make impact. And if we don't make impact, then our companies are going to continue to not be reflective of the communities in which they serve. So I share that point because I think that that's core to everything we do at San Diego Squared, from our interactions, not just with our students, but with partners like you all. We want to make sure that we're reflective of that humanity that we want to bring into this space. So thank you both for the opportunity to be here. My journey actually has nothing to do with STEM, right? I think when we think about San Diego Squared, we're trying to build an organization that a lot of us wish we had, right? I want to be that person, that big brother, that partner, that mentor that I wish I always had into STEM. I was born in New York. I grew up in Texas. Both of my parents are immigrants from Colombia. We faced some real financial struggle growing up. It was difficult and not unique, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of families that are facing the same things that we faced growing up. I was very fortunate to get to undergrad at George Mason University just outside of DC. My mother laughs because I pulled up to college with a can opener and a towel because that's all that she could give me and a pocket full of dreams. She likes to remind me that. And those dreams were really important. I had no pillows, I had no sheets, I didn't have anything. But through some hard work, some mentorship, some support, and guidance, I was able to graduate with a political science degree because I was just trying to get the easiest degree I could, and then went off to London for grad school. And after grad school, I was in management consulting, just traveling the world, mostly U.S. and Europe, um, advising board strategy, leadership development stuff. Ended up at a venture-backed startup out of the Bay, and that's probably where I got my first taste of STEM. We were working on a gamification technology, and it was really fast paced and a lot of incredible people on the team. And so I was able to see firsthand, like, wow, the power of scale, the power of technology, and just kind of to feel the wave in the bay of where this kind of force of innovation was coming through. I was burnt out and I was really tired. And about a decade ago, I transitioned into nonprofit work. This is a part of the story where I talk about my wife. My wife is a boss. She is such a boss lady. She is a PharmD, a pharmacist. She's a PhD in oncology, cancer research. And she speaks like 3, 4 different languages, and she's extremely sociable, which you know is really important in STEM. And so she holds us down. She's able to make the money and have the sort of high paying job and does incredible work and impacts humanity and human health. And so I say that for 2 reasons. One, to honor the how she's able to hold us down and support us as a family, and to share that because I feel very fortunate to have that. But the second reason, and more specific to the work that we do, is I think it allows me to keep it 1,000 everywhere I go. It allows me to bring my human self and my whole self in every room I'm in. It allows me to speak my truth and share that without worry of any retribution or any sort of pushback. And or pushback's not a good word, but you know, with any negative responses that might go, far. And I say that to say because I think that with respect to diversity and inclusion, oftentimes we're not having the tough conversations. We're not able to have the tough conversations, and so we focus sometimes on the things that are possibly lower hanging fruit instead of actually getting to the core of the problem of why we don't see these companies reflective of the communities in which they serve. And so I feel very fortunate and very privileged to be able to do that. The example I always give is chief diversity officer comes into a company, looks at the company, they look on the right and they see up at the board level, there's 12 people that all look the same. And instead of saying something to the executive leadership or working on that part that might be very difficult and high hanging fruit, if you will, they'll go to unconscious bias training, they'll go to their recruitment practices, which are all very important. But if you don't have the big tough conversation on your right with the executive team and the board, you can be doing a ton of work on the other side, and a great talented individual comes into your company, and if they don't see that they have a path and they don't see themselves reflected in the leadership, that can be really problematic for an organization. Before I was at SD2, I was at an organization called Connect. Connect is a high-tech life science startup accelerator that's been around for 40 years now. At Connect, I started a program called Connect All and took it from concept to about $4 million in funding to build the region's first diversity-focused startup accelerator. And we brought it to Southeast San Diego, which for the listeners that don't know about San Diego, sort of geographically, there's a saying that's north of the 8 and south of the 8, and that the north of the 8 is probably the more affluent area, and south of the 8, where southeast San Diego is one of the most underrepresented and underserved parts of our city. And so we brought the access to capital, the mentorship that you see up in north of the 8 in UTC and La Jolla, and we brought it down to southeast San Diego. And that's really where I got my first sort of my chops in diversity and inclusion and innovation, right? Taking these innovative ideas around diversity and inclusion, but actually operationalizing them. Because as you know, that bridging the gap or threading the needle between what's happening in industry and what's happening in underrepresented communities is oftentimes a very difficult and challenging objective to do. So that is kind of my backstory, and then I'm happy to talk about how SD2 started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
I definitely want to get to that. We shared, like, we have so many questions. I think this could be like a 3-part interview, really.
I do want to say that you are a good example of somebody that didn't let your beginning define you. You saw opportunity. George Mason is a really great interview. University. I'm sure there's a story how you got there, and I won't hold it against you that you were a political science major, because you're looking at one right now. So I
we're everywhere. Mindset. We're everywhere.
Yeah. But it's amazing the number of folks we have interviewed, we have met that did not start out in STEM, but something triggered them to go down that path. Like diversity and inclusion is really important because it's very close to us. We definitely focus on that in the organization. So I love that story. I know that's what SD2 is focused on. You have something to say.
Well, I want to get into it, but I do want to say that it's really important that we do have these tough conversations. And we all know that DEI, as it's known, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a priority. And I kind of roll my eyes and air quote, because for those of us who've been doing this for a long time, it's always been a priority. But industry has just decided recently that it is more of a priority. And so it's nice to know that we can be out there and, like you said, thread that needle between what the work that's being done, the youth in our programs, and the future.
I think you said something here that now it's the focus. And it's kind of like STEM. For years, we were involved with STEM, and it wasn't resonating with a lot of folks. And all of a sudden, it became this term everybody was mentioning, and all these people were jumping in. But I didn't feel like they had the same passion or interest. They were following the money. And you're a person that your story tells me you've been there at the very beginning, you've been working hard at something, and now it's becoming popular. And so, how do you deal with that? Do you invite people in, or do you have that little internal resistance? It's like you're just entering, you don't know everything's been going on for the last 10 plus years.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are a couple thoughts, right? Like, one is like, why STEM? I think, and for me, there's a really interesting statistic that I like to share, which is in 2006, of the 6 most valuable companies in the world, only one was a technology company. You fast forward just a decade to 2016, of the 6 most valuable companies, 5 are technology companies, right? And what does that tell you? That tells you that's where all the jobs are being created. That's where all the capital is being created. That's where all the wealth is being generated. But then when you break down the makeup of those companies, their diversity, they are obviously not reflective of the community in which they served. And so this is where my political science hat, right? In grad school, I was really infatuated with this income inequality, right? And I'm somewhat of a realist. I come from what I call the realist side of diversity inclusion. And for me, what that means is that, all roads for me lead to income inequality. I don't care if you're talking gender disparity, environmental disparities, criminal justice, education, debt, financial, all of the sort of inequities we see in society today. For me, and this might be controversial, whatever. To me, all those roads, like they say, all roads lead to Rome. All roads lead to income inequality. And so back to those statistics that I said earlier, I became really interested to say, well, it seems like mathematic, right? A plus B equals C, right? So if this rocket ship's taking off, right, and right now it doesn't look like a reflective of the communities in which they serve, well, if I can get more people on that rocket ship that look like the communities in which we operate, well, then maybe we can address income inequality. And if we can address income inequality, what are the knockoffs or unintended consequences that can happen from that if all of a sudden you have women Zuckerbergs and Black African American Elon Musk and Latino, Sheryl Sandbergs, or whatever, name your leader, right? And so that, I think, is the perspective with which I look at why STEM is important. To your other point about like, how do I feel now that people are there? Well, I've put in a lot of thought, and I actually don't think it's as nefarious as sometimes people feel it is. And what I mean by that is, I actually think that perhaps it maybe started nefarious back in the day. We don't want to see certain groups in our company, but I think over time it's become systemic to where a lot of times it's by the very nature of the way that, especially high growth companies and which are mostly STEM companies, their very nature is one that's exclusive, right? And what I mean by that is, if I gave you $100 million and I told you to scale up to 100 people tomorrow for the podcast, right? I'm an investor and I've got quarterly meetings and you've got to execute, because if not, I'm going to fire you and we're not scaling and I need return and I'm a professional investor. What are you going to do? You might have the honest intention, right, to go and find diverse candidates and to diversify. But the reality is it's grab and go situation, right? You're on this rocket ship that's taking off 1,000 miles per hour, and you need to hire a CFO, a customer success team, an X team, a researcher, this and that. So what it becomes is grab and go. Who are you going to ask? You're going to ask your mom. You're going to ask the people that are around you, the people in your school, the people in your church, right? Well, of course, those people usually look like you, right? And are you, right? And so I think that oftentimes when we're designing diversity and inclusion programs, and that's not to say there aren't any nefarious actors, because I don't want to like give everyone clearance here, but I also want to be thoughtful about the situation that companies find themselves in. And oftentimes we see programs with respect to diversity and inclusion are designed from the community's perspective in the industry. And they ask the industry to mold themselves into where the community's at. When the reality is, if you're an executive or you're a board member and the rubber hits the road, you cannot do that, right? I'll give you a simple example. Oftentimes you'll say companies need to give me a guaranteed internship or a guaranteed job placement. There's nothing guaranteed in that world. That world is moving so fast that if they have to scale tomorrow, they need talent tomorrow. If they have an issue and they need that issue solved today, right? And so a lot of community orgs or schools will go and say, I need a guaranteed slot. And the company, it won't work out. And even if they do accept someone, what happens is it's sort of done haphazardly, right? Because the company, now that intern manager is like, oh my God, Shelly's here today. What do I do? I've completely forgot because I was working on the stuff that I need to scale at. And so I'm just going to, just spin circles, turn right the entire time until the time is up. I'm going to sign off whatever you need and we're going to go, right? And so instead, what we do, right, in our programs, and we can dive deeper, but in this case, what we ask for is a guaranteed look, right? So what I want to do is I want, when you have an opportunity, you let us know. And then what I want to do is have a direct channel into your organization, and we will post it out and we will send it out through our network and we'll get candidates. But what I want from you is a guarantee that that candidate is going to get pulled out of the application pool and you're going to send it to the hiring manager to look at it. And all I ask, instead of a guaranteed job, is a guaranteed look, right? Now that feels better for someone who's on the HR side of things and talent, because now, okay, because we've got to hire the best, right? And then, but right, what we're doing is massive, because if you think at some of these big life science companies, one in San Diego, super well known, they get 7,000 applicants for 80 internship slots. So we're able to move a diverse candidate from one of 7,000 that's probably going to get eaten up by the HR algorithm to now one of a few hundred, if that, the talent acquisition team will see, and maybe one out of 50 that the hiring manager is going to see. And now you start to really think about how you can really make an impact, right, for these students and act as an internal referral. But we've built a program that meets the company where it's at, that fits nicely where the company. And so I think the future of this work in a lot of ways is really developing solutions that meet the company where they are at and moves that into the community. Because if you do that, I think you're going to be much more effective and I think that that's really the driving force for why it's like not happening and why it hasn't happened, and why I think there's an opportunity to make it happen in a different way, as opposed to it being like they're upset. So I guess I empathize more. I guess that's my perspective, that I kind of have that compassion to understand the circumstances they're in. And then I'm sort of trying to build a solution that meets them in a way so that the friction isn't on them, and then they're quicker to adapt that opportunity or that program.
So I think it's a good opportunity to circle around and talk about ST2. But before we do that, what you said resonated with me from my own experience. So Kelly and I both went to a state school and learned very early on that because we were from the state school, they were going to look at our resume, or even because we're not a top 10 Ivy League school. So I like what you're talking about. Giving them at least a chance for a book. It's amazing what you'll find when there's so many people, so much talent out there. And I work with Indian and I work with some of the most amazing people, and oftentimes they're overlooked because they don't fit the mold. I've been blessed by that. So I'm really excited to learn more about ST2 and what it's doing in this type of approach.
100%, because no community, no university has a monopoly on talent, right? That's equally distributed throughout all communities and universities. And so this gets into the competitive advantage piece, right? So that if you're a company and every other company is looking at only Ivy, and you're smart enough to tap into the talent base that's at these state schools or at your local schools, right? Or you're investing in building a pipeline even earlier, right? You're going to have a competitive advantage when everyone's fighting for the same Harvard student, the same student at Howard University or Dartmouth or wherever, when no one's looking at Cal State University San Marcos, right? And so I agree with you 1,000% that there is talent in places, and it becomes a competitive advantage for companies. And I think, the war for talent is only getting more like prevalent and important on a global scale, especially now you can work remotely and I don't need to be on site. And so now you're competing with everyone, right? And so I just think that moving the conversation around diversity and inclusion away from the sort of foundation side of the house, the feel good side of the house, the photo op side of the house, the marketing side of the house, and moving it into the HR, C-suite, competitive advantage, economic advantage, imperative, the business case is, I think, where we need to move, and where I hope to be a part of.
Wow. Lots to talk about here. Well, tell us more about ST2.
Yeah. So
because our listeners, our viewers might not have heard about you, and we really do want to take a look at what you're doing and the 4 pillars. And
perfect. Thank you. So I'll sort of be as quick as I can so we can dive in, because I can already see this as a thoughtful group that likes to chat, and so do I. So San Diego Squared was born 2 years ago this month. I was in between projects. People say, I'm a serial you hear the term serial entrepreneur. I feel like I'm a serial community entrepreneur. I just like the kind of, figuring out these community problems and finding solutions for them. So
social. How about a socialpreneur?
Yeah, socialpreneur. Exactly. I'm a serial socialpreneur. I love it. I was in between thinking about what I was going to do next, and I got a message from a mutual connection of Bill and me named Sabrina Johnson. Shout out to Sabrina over at Dare Biosciences, an incredible biotech company that's changing the game in women's health. And she sends me this message saying, "Hey, the chairman of our board, Bill Rastetter, is interested in diversity and inclusion, and you are the one person I know he should definitely talk to, given the work that you've done. Would you mind talking to him?" Like, fine, sure, no problem, because I give this stuff freely and I want to share more. And an hour before I do the due diligence, I Google search Bill Rastetter, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy is an extremely accomplished biotech executive, if not one of the most accomplished biotech executives in the history of biotech. He created a drug in the late 90s called Rituxin. Rituxin is used in millions and millions of cancer patients. It has saved millions of lives, literally. And then he went on to start and sell and start and grow a number of very high profile companies like Receptos, and was a founding board member at Illumina when it was a few dozen employees, and then chairman of the board for over a decade. And now Illumina's 10,000 employees strong and leading the genomics sort of revolution, and then several other companies. And I say this to, and I guess an unknown fact about Bill is that he was born in Panama. So he was born in Latin America. His father was a diplomat, and he's got a really strong affinity. He speaks better Spanish than I do. It's where he grew up. And so he's got a really strong affinity with Latino culture. And so I say all that not to toot his horn, although I'll always honor him for the incredible work he's done. But I say that all to say that Bill and the board that he's been able to assemble is access into an industry that is very, very unique. And as we know, this industry is really closed off. It's really difficult to access. And being very direct here, Bill has made a lot of people very, very successful, right? Because of the companies he's led, because of the cures that he's invented, frankly, he's made a lot of companies, grown companies, given people their first companies, made a lot of people successful. And so we essentially, you can kind of see the match here, right? On one hand, you have someone that has real deep access into an industry that's super closed off and difficult to access, right? When he picks up the phone, people really listen, right? And then you have someone who's taken these innovative ideas around diversity and inclusion and been able to operationalize them, right? And then you take that and you bring some incredible community leaders and business leaders to the table, right? That's what you have in San Diego Squared, right? We essentially leverage that access, that ability to open doors in an industry that I couldn't do, that a teacher couldn't do, that an administrator, a principal couldn't do, a professor couldn't do. And we leverage that ability and we connect those opportunities to diverse students in high school and in college. What we're essentially doing is building a scouting network similar to the farm league in baseball or the scouting network in Premier League soccer that goes into high schools and colleges, hyper local through a scouting network, identifies diverse students. And by diverse, we are primarily looking at Black, African American, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Indigenous groups, and Southeast Asian Pacific Islanders. We go and identify these students that have shown a real interest or a real excellence in STEM, right? And maybe that comes from their physics teacher that says, you know what, like H has been doing some weird stuff in physics. He's a great candidate for your program. Or maybe it's a community or after school organization that says, hey, Shelly's been working on this stuff in biology and she really loves this stuff, right? And what we do is we identify these students and then we bring them into our programs and then we fortify them. Right? We fortify them with financial support and not just direct scholarships, right? But we incentivize their work, like gift cards. We give them food stipends. So each of our high school fellows gets $100 a month food stipend for them. We give them transportation to make sure that they can get to and from. We will fundraise for clothes. I mean, we fortify them. And then what we do, which is really signature to San Diego Squared, is each of the students that we work with is paired with a year-long mentor. Right? Because our kind of overall hypothesis is that money's not new in this space. People have been throwing money at diversity and inclusion for quite some time, right? But we can't move the needle. And we think that the reason why you can't move the needle is because it's not just financial support. It's when you pair that financial support with real human connection, right? Human connection that we want to see do three things. The first is build that student's STEM identity, their sense of belonging, right? They got to see themselves as that chemist, as that computer engineer. The second is help build the students' nuanced understanding of the industry, right? If the most competitive and compelling candidates for roles are the ones that understand the role deeply. They understand the nuance that's going in. So you want to be a chemist. Okay, great. Are you a theoretical chemist? Are you a computational chemist? Are you a biochemist? Like, you really got to get into the nuts and bolts. So you want to be a programmer. Okay, great. What languages do you code in, right? Are you front end? Are you back end? Are you full stack? That nuanced understanding of the industry is really critical. And the third thing that we want to do through our mentorship and our programs is, and this is kind of the where the rubber hits the road, is we've got to build these students through social capital and network, right? Our mentors open up their own personal Rolodex, open up their own networks to leverage opportunities for their mentees and for the broader organization, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the stuff that happens in these groups that you see dominate these industries, because they have that, right? But if you don't come from an aunt or uncle that went to Harvard or went to Yale that can write your letter of recommendation, or you don't have any connection with someone that works at Illumina or Facebook or Google, right? And you're trying to apply, there's going to be really difficult for you to do that. And so we try to replicate that, but for diverse students in STEM. Now, we've got 4 areas of activity that we focus on. The first is community activation. This is really around sharing, inspiring, and empowering stories that lift the voices of diverse STEM professionals. The kind of thought here is diversity has long existed in STEM. We just do a terrible job of sharing that story and lifting their voices. And so we do that on our website, sd2.org. We do that through our STEM capsules. The other thing we do is we host events in the community where we invite all of our partners. We know that we sit at the middle of a lot of really deep, meaningful connections. And oftentimes, if you're a company, you may want to connect with the community, but you don't know where to go. And the vice versa. You might be a teacher that wants to connect your students to a company or a few companies or a few careers, but you don't have the relationships and you don't have the time or the bandwidth because you're not getting paid enough and you don't have a lot of time and you're focused on the students. So we help make that easier for people through hosting these quarterly events where incredible people can come together and connections can happen. The second thing that we do is our Squared Fellows program for high school students. This program is a rotation-based program where high school students apply. If they get accepted, they get assigned a mentor for a year, and they go through a rotation-based program where each rotation they visit a different type of STEM company. So 1 week they'll go to a biotech, Neurocrine. The next week they'll go to a med tech company like Illumina. Then they'll go to a high-tech company like Viasat. And then maybe the next week they'll go to a venture-backed startup like Drata, right? The idea is to take these students that have demonstrated this excellence in STEM and really show them the breadth and the depth of opportunities in STEM so they can start to think about that as they're applying for colleges to figure out what they want to study. So that's our second focus. Our third is our Scholars Program. This is really our funding arm, allows us to provide scholarships. We've given out in the last 2 years almost $400,000 in scholarships. We've got 14 scholars in our program. 7 of our scholars are getting full rides. Our money is matched with the local university through our partnership with UCSD Paths programs. The key thing here is that scholarships are new, right? And so for us, giving the money is not enough. When we invest in these students, we see ourselves as strategic investors. And so every student that's given a scholarship is paired with a year-long mentor. The idea is to really have someone that can help them navigate that college and belay them, right? That's always there for them, the kind of magnet that they can always come to, so that we aren't losing the students that kind of go through the cracks and end up like us with political science degrees. And then the last thing that we do is our Squared Interns program. And this is essentially a dual-sided marketplace where we are able to identify paid internship opportunities at STEM-driven companies and connect those to diverse students locally on campus. We looked at the internships, and what we found was companies do 3 things right now, right? They'll go to the Career Center, and they'll drop it there. But then that's like, most students like me, I didn't know what a Career Center was, one. But then all of a sudden now you're like one of 30,000 students if you're at a big university. You're like, man, that could never be me. Once again, if you don't have the STEM identity and that confidence, you may not apply. It becomes difficult to identify diverse talent, right? The second thing that companies will do is they'll do an app. Some hotshot from the Bay or Austin will sell them on an app that will go out like called Handshake. And you just post your opportunity here and it's going to go to everyone on campus and you're going to get all these candidates. The same issues that I said before happen, right? But now you've competing this student with Oxford and Yale and Harvard, right? And the third thing that they do, which is important, is they'll go to HBCUs right? So they'll be at Howard, they'll be at Morehouse, they'll be at Spelman. But what about CSU San Marcos, which is just down the street from me, a state school where 47% are underrepresented students, right? And we're not tapping into that, right? And when we've looked at why we're not tapping into that, we realize that there's sort of what we call the twin dilemmas. There's the dilemma on the company side and the dilemma on the community side. On the company side, most companies, even large companies, do not have the talent acquisition team, a big enough HR team, recruiting team, to be able to go local on campus and identify diverse talent, right? They're not able to go in and build a relationship with the dean of the STEM school and the dean of the business school and the professor of chemistry and the student organization for the women in mathematics at UC San Diego, right? And so they're not able to send their opportunities hyper local. That's why they revert to those three ways that I described earlier. We act as the organization that allows them to do that, right? Because we maintain a scouting network across these campuses that let us know who the MBA contact is on a campus, who the mathematics contact is, who the chemistry contact is, right? And so when there's an opportunity that's posted with us, we're able to immediately send it through our scouting network and get hyper local. And it makes sense for us to maintain that because we're working 5 internships at Illumina, 5 at Qualcomm, 5 at Google, and now we've got 50 internships replacing. The dilemma is the same on the community side. If you're a professor or you're a teacher or you're a dean, you don't have the bandwidth to be able to, you might have 50 students that are interested in 30 different companies or 30 different fields. You're not going to go and build all those relationships. And back to our previous point, even if you did try to reach out, you didn't make anyone successful in that industry, and you don't have real deep relationships in that industry. So it's going to be really difficult for you to actually build a real meaningful foothold within a particular company, much less 5 or 6 or 10. That's where we come in. And so through our Squared Interns program, powered by what we call our Talent Diversity Network, we're able to connect paid internship opportunities through a scouting network that's hyper local. So now we're meeting students where they're at and being able to get to them locally. So that is SD2. You can kind of see the pipeline, right? We've got events that are getting people activated and really building community, right? Because you really need community. That then flows into our Squared Fellows program for high school students, right? That gives them front row access. They're exploring opportunities and careers to then drive their decision making for college. We fund them through scholarships and opportunities, and then fortify them with a year-long mentor. And then we place them directly in paid internship opportunities. Because at the end of the day, this work does not, at the end of the day, our focus is to get students in careers with 401ks and career trajectory, right? And if we're not doing that, then all of the other work that we're doing is for naught. And so that is the SD2 model. That is the way that's working on. And I know that was a lot, but, like I said, there's no more low-hanging fruit in this space,
It's amazing what you're doing. And there's so much that we're in agreement on, like-minded, particularly the need to support the students year-round. One of the things that I have gotten frustrated with over the years is a lot of great one-time events or one-off events just to get people interested, but never really coming alongside and supporting long-term. And so I think that is a really powerful way to support our students, to really make a significant difference, to give them a competitive advantage, and to grow them in a way that's going to benefit. This isn't a short-term investment, really.
No.
This is a long-term. I think a lot of people are looking for, can we make change? But like you alluded to, the last 10 years, we've been talking about so much of this, but nothing has changed. So who's asking these hard questions about what is working? And so tell us a little bit about the outcome. Brag a little bit about some of the outcome that you're having and how it's working, and how many students are serving, and what are some of your proudest moments?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good one. It's always good to reflect on that stuff. Right now, we've got 16 fellows in our program that we've been working with. We piloted last fall, so we're coming up on our first year. We piloted with 4 students. Then we ramped up to 12 students. Each of those students are meeting with a year-long mentor. A sort of two kind of success stories out of that. I think one is Mercy, always comes to mind. Our first cohort fellow, she is Ethiopian young lady, junior, was really interested in computer science. Um, Went to see Neurocrine and Illumina and realized that and noticed that in all of the conversations she was having that there was a real interest in people with technology background in life sciences, and that increasingly these roles that are at the interface of tech and life science are becoming like a real demand that she didn't realize. And afterwards, and she reported this even after she had done it, she then goes back to school and enrolls in AP biology. It rekindled her love for biology, and she re-enrolled in AP biology. Now, one thing to just do biology, but then to do AP biology, right? And I just think that that's just such an incredible impact that you can have on someone by just showing them what opportunities are there. And for her on her own to then go and sign up for a class, now knowing, right? Because now it's in her brain. She knows because she spoke with someone that says, hey, the future is at the interface of two things that you're extremely passionate about. And she thought she had to choose, right? And so I can't help but be super excited and enthusiastic about that small impact. Back to what you were talking about, like the long-term lens in which we do this. Bill talks about it a lot. Our board, this is generational work, right? We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to come out here with like some passionate pitch from me and some good access from our board, right? It's real generational work. And so to see that happen in Mercy and to know what that means for her and her trajectory to be so confident as a junior, what that butterfly effect is going to be later, I think it's powerful. The other story is just a really great mentor match that we were able to connect with. We've got a student named Nico Gutierrez, a sophomore, and his dream is film and design and kind of the data analytics of marketing and kind of that sort of stuff. But his real passion was politics. He wanted to be in politics, like that's it. And if he had to choose, he would choose politics. And so with some conversation, I tried to explain, and I think he really understood, is that, hey, politics is starting to interface with technology in very deep ways, right? I mean, in good ways and in bad ways, but it's interfacing, right? And there's a real opportunity for you to embrace those both loves that you have. And then we were able to connect him with a really special mentor in Eric Caldwell, who was the deputy chief operating officer of the city of San Diego, former chief of staff to several politicians, but now running the data analytics for a fast-growing startup called Atlas. And so now he's got this mentor that's working with him that looks like him, shares the lived experience, but also is living that ability to marry the two passions that Nico has. And for Nico to be able to see that at such a young age, I think is extremely powerful. We've got our interns program. The big success story for our interns program is probably going to be Charles, who was our first intern that we placed. Charles was placed at a company, a young black man, CSU San Marcos chemistry major, was having a lot of difficulty applying for jobs. Had no idea what he was going to do or where he would end up with respect to his degree, was getting a little frustrated. We were able to place him as a drug discovery intern at Traycon Pharmaceutical through our interns program. And now he's their most recent full-time employee. And a few months ago was just so hyped, realizing that he was going to get his first bonus. Had no idea that he was going to get a bonus and to get a bonus, right? And to think about the trajectory that his whole career is going to go into, not because we did anything. He was incredible already. All we did was create an opportunity for him to be seen for who he was and who he is, the excellence that he already is sitting there, right? And he's not unique. There's a lot of students there, just like Charles, that are sitting there bad to the bone, ready to go, give them the ball, coach, but they're just not able to be seen. And we're able to provide a platform for them to be seen. And I think that that's just really incredible. And I think the final story I'll give about our scholars is we've got a young lady, freshman at UC San Diego, named Sophia. She wants to be a neurosurgeon. She's seen family firsthand struggle with mental health, and it's a big passion for her. Latina, Mexicana. Her mentor, every year, the mentors and mentees, they work on what's their goal for the year. And their goal was set at to connect with a neurosurgeon. And so B, her mentor, his name's B, reached out and was like, "Hey, we need to find her neurosurgeons, and I'm not being successful. How can we help?" We immediately put the call out through our network, and I'm proud to say that Sophia's meeting currently with 7 neurosurgeons, and a majority of them are diverse. And when she called me telling me about this, she called me saying that she was crying to her mother. "Look what's happening, Mom." And for her, as a young woman, to sit with 7 neurosurgeons, right, that look like her, that share lived experience, what that's going to do to supercharge her next 4 years to ensure that she doesn't get lost, right? And those are the kind of stories that are really, really impactful and meaningful. And the stories that if we can do 100 of those a year with 100 mentors and do that over 10 years, that's 2,000 people, right? It's powerful stuff, I think.
I love what you're talking about, and particularly your first talk about that came back to school with AP biology, and we're big fans of temporary camps because you take basically 9 months to 12 months these courses that are cutting edge, that are what the degree is requiring, and I just remember our experience, applying for political science. And all mapped out, you're going to take classes freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. You're going to go get a job, and maybe not so applicable to political science. But I see somebody in a computer science degree, and some of the students we talked to, they were mapped out of what programming languages we're taking. And when they graduate, they find out that's all old news. We're working at this other language. So for your students to be out there and speaking with professionals and finding out this is what you need to be focusing on, and they can do it. They can divert a little bit and make sure when they graduate, they've got those skills they need to jump right in versus I graduated a 4-year degree or 5 nowadays. Like, wow, I'm still short, so I have to go back. So I love what your program's connecting them with people and they're hands-on, knowing what they need to succeed in what they're pursuing.
Yeah, I think what you describe is what we through our mentorship, but we try to tether these students, belay them to the industry, right? And along the journey, they have that kind of safety net, right? That they can, because that's all life is, right? You're getting these inputs and you're making a decision based off of these inputs. But if you didn't grow up with an aunt or an uncle that's a pharmacist or a software engineer, you're not getting those inputs into your calculation, right? But if we're able to connect that, and now they're getting these inputs that says, "Hey, look, this is where the industry's going." They're able to see someone like dressed like this in a t-shirt and jeans, having this incredible job. They can go on vacations. They can do those things. All of that's going to be now part of that student's decision making, right? Because they can't help but not see it. And I think that's kind of the small, subtle human things that we're trying to do, which is like, you can't pay for that. You have to be thoughtful and you have to build that real human connection, and people got to feel that, because if they don't feel that, then they're just not going to have that. And if you don't have that, then you're missing the whole point. And I think that's where, this stuff becomes really exciting, because now it's how can we make these diversity and inclusion initiatives and programs more human, right? The data's there, the people, the curriculum's there. They're graduating more females at MIT. There's more women in medical school. Diverse candidates are graduating at greater rates in STEM, but we aren't moving the needle where it matters in the jobs. So what's missing? And for me, it's that real thoughtful human connection with that industry that I think has been missing. And then I also think that companies are ready for this. They've been tired of people going up to them asking them for another 100,000, $500,000 for this new data thing or this new thing. And instead, we approach companies and say, "Hey, I need 10 mentors, right? I need you to host students in your company." And that's the stuff that's going to move the needle. Yes, I need your money, but what I need more than that is that real human connection. And only you can do that. And I think that's really exciting.
Absolutely. So as a social entrepreneur myself, I'm curious at this sort of, I think you're pointing at this, but how are you making ends meet? How are you providing all of this? Is it through grant funding? Is it through organizational sponsorship? How does that portion work?
Yeah, and I think this is like a really good question. And for the sustainable business model is always the number one most important thing an organization can do. Point one. Point two is that this becomes extremely difficult oftentimes, especially with diversity and inclusion work, because once again, the majority of the programs are sort of community driven, and when they're community driven, they're usually somebody that's super passionate but may not have the financial means to sustain something. And then if we're talking about generational work, that kind of compounds it even more, right?
Yeah.
Because now it's like, I need an investor to invest in me for 10, 20 years before they even see, you're planting the seed for the tree you may not sit under the shade of, right? And so it just be like, it be in this, and then it's very human work, right? So it's not like you'll ever have kind of the revenue model in the same kind of way. So there are a couple of things that we have that I think are unique. One is obviously Bill and our board they're very successful, right? We're very fortunate in that we've got funders, corporate funders, high net worth individuals, philanthropists, people that have been very successful in their business, that believe in the work that the board, Bill, myself, the team, we're trying to accomplish. And I think people are excited about the unique approach, and I think that helps us. And so we're very fortunate to have that. We're also constantly on the lookout for grant funding and sort of municipal funding, federal, state, local. But I think kind of the long road for us is kind of something I alluded to earlier, which is we've got to move the conversation from outside of the foundation and into the HR space, right? We've got to be able to do a great job of building a case for the heads of HR when they go into their executive meeting to say, look, why do when the CEO asks or the finance CFO asks, why are we giving $100,000 a year to San Diego Square? Right? That's going to be the question. And we've got to have a good answer. And to me, that answer sounds something like, well, let me tell you why. We have been able to hire 2 interns because of the network that they have, right? And let's say that salary for easy math is $100,000. Well, on average, a company is going to pay an HR recruiter something between 25 to 30, 35% first year salary. We'll call it 30, right? So in those 2 hires, that company has just gotten $60,000 worth of value, right? But on top of that, not only are they getting the $60,000 worth of value, but they're investing in ensuring that they're building the pipeline for the future, right? So that we are planting seeds for students and talent that we're going to need later, right? And because they know that we help to support and plant that, they're going to be much more likely to work with us, right? And so now we start to make the case very, very compelling. And so that now when a company is like wondering, hey, should we invest in this? We've moved away from the, oh, it feels good, it's the right thing to do, to, hey, this is a real competitive advantage. And that's not even taking the case, the whole CSR movement from employees, which now talent, all the data shows that no one wants to work for your company if you're not acting right in the community, right? Which is a pressure point we also help. But then also the ESG, which is investors saying, hey, I'm not going to write you a check because I can't go home and have my family. So you're not going to get a check unless you're acting right, right? And meanwhile, the executive team's looking around saying, but I sell genomic sequencing machine, or I do software. I don't do community work, and we're not built for that because I'm scaling, because I need a return on my investment, whether public or privately traded. That's where we can come in and be that real value add for them, right? So that's kind of our future goal. But obviously we need investment to get there, and we're very fortunate to have that. We'll continue to look for funding and grants, but we hope that we can make such a compelling case on the HR side to the board that when they're cutting and they're thinking about what they should cut and what they should invest in, that we become a real value add, a real economic case for supporting San Diego Square.
Awesome.
Well, I'm going to speak on behalf of Shelley and myself, and we are true believers in what you are doing at ST2, and
thank you.
And would like to know what we can do to help you.
Yeah, we primarily focus locally right now, and so if you know any local mentors, local companies that would be willing to host students. Obviously, financial is always the support, but really just doing what you're doing now, right? You are part of lifting the voices of so many of us that are focused, head down. I'm not unique. There's a lot of H's out there, and the fact that you two, day in and day out, even though sometimes the tech isn't working for you, you're still sticking through and you're trying to lift our voice. I think that's just incredible. And I just, would just thank you for doing that, because it's the part that I'm not the best at. I just like put my head down and go to work, and to have people like you standing, supporting, lifting my voice and our voice as an organization, I think is really powerful. So thank you for doing that.
Patient and humble.
Wow.
And a master of business. I see like the sparks flying. I'm so much here, but so we just want to say thank you for your time and the extended amount of time that you've taken with us. And I hope that maybe in the future we can check back in.
Yeah, I love that.
And what's happening.
I would love
that. Continue this conversation, because it is so extremely important to not only the youth that we serve and the businesses who are part of our network, but truly the communities and a greater world.
Yeah.
The conversation doesn't end here.
No. And look, our vision is to scale this out, right? So we're focused in San Diego to get the model right. Once we get it going, I think we'd like to expand, Bay squared, LA squared, Boston squared, Albuquerque squared, because I think these issues aren't unique to San Diego. And if we can come up with a model that connects community, industry, and academia, and we can then do it in different communities, I think we'll be doing well and making a good impact in the community. So maybe we'll be in Albuquerque before you know it.
Absolutely. I can't say it any better than that. So thank you so much for joining us.
Right on.
Until next time, because there will be a next time. Hey there, this is Shelley, and I am so glad that you have stopped by STEM Southwest. Can I ask a favor? If you've gotten some value out of our episodes, if you are just powered by nerd power and are excited about what we're doing, or if you're new to us and you've got just an interest, subscribe now to help us grow by doing that. Then take a moment and give us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast player, because we could use your support and help. We are trying to raise up an army of STEM Southwest supporters. And then last, think about sharing our podcast with your friends, your families, or even complete STEM strangers, because, it's all about making the world a better place and having more STEM rock stars highlighted and connected. Stop by our website if you're looking for resources, and you're going to find a lot of things that's going to grow over time. So continue to stop on in and join us. Subscribe now and support STEMSW.com.
You've been listening to the STEM Southwest podcast. Nerd on, fellow STEM nerds.